I'm Kyle Licott, your host for another edition of VCTV. I'm super excited to bring back some great friends who are brilliant in the industries that we're going to be talking about, and welcome some new friends as well to the show, and also to share with you, our audience, all kinds of stuff. And now here on VCTV, every day we talk about what's happening and what the latest trends, along with where money is or is not going, and where things are shifting in various industries, regions, and technologies around the world. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality. We've touched on these in different respects. AI, we've concentrated a lot on recently, and that is because as a core technology, it is playing a role in all that we do in our lives, from work to play to daily life. It's important to understand how this is intersecting with all of these other areas and industries we're talking about. Virtual. Guess what? We're coming to you from Zoom virtually all around the world. But what's the next step of that? Where do we go from here? What is this new reality that we're going to be hitting into? And also augmented reality. How does the world around us shift and change with power of technology? And for those that are just tuning in, and this is maybe a new topic for you, I want to call out a few big headlines and why this is such a big, important topic. More on the virtual side, but AI plays a role in all of this. One, Apple. Apple has come out and talked all about the future of what they're going to be doing, or teasing about the future of what they're doing in augmented reality, AR. They have apparently glasses that are going to be coming out. This is a big advancement over what Google had released almost 10 years ago now as Google Glass. We also have Google, another big player in the space, acquiring North, a very big player again in the optics space. We have new management entering the industry for Magic Leap, a company that has raised billions of dollars, pushing forward the bounds of technology and virtual reality, yet still has not come to market, but a lot happening in there. We have Facebook going through drastic changes, mixing up their Oculus line, a company they acquired just about 7 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point. But new headsets are coming, old headsets are going away, new platforms are coming out. There is a huge surge in use around these due to what's happened in the world in the last 6 months. And now going forward, we have virtual reality being touted potentially as the next Peloton platform. We see events going virtual. Travis Scott is going to be doing a first ever, along with John Legend, I believe, first ever full virtual event. So we have conferences, we have concerts that are also going virtual. We have classrooms that are going full virtual headsets, surgeries that are being performed on a virtual level. If this isn't enough to get you excited, trust me, this next conversation hour will. There's a lot happening in this space, and we're about to dive into it. And again, data and artificial intelligence and what Gary and some of our other guests have to share in that space will further get you ready for this, whether it's to build, to offer new products and services, to validate what you're doing, or where to start putting your capital to work. Now, as I do here on every show of VCTV, a big shout out to Elena and to the entire LaToken team for bringing us all together virtually from around the world in different locations to your screen everywhere and anywhere you may be in the world. So big thank you to them. And a thank you to all of you for tuning in at any moment today. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up, click the subscribe button. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you on what else we can talk about. And also, if you would like to be on the show. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to get to them. If not, we're all available online and be happy to chat with you about the subject matters today and other items as well. Now, let's have some fun. Let's welcome our guests to get to the subjects at hand. Again, welcoming old friends and new alike. First off, Gary, the grandmaster, the end-all be-all of artificial intelligence. He himself may be an AI at this point for how much knowledge he's got. But Gary, welcome to the show. Welcome back. Intro.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
You will all find out why I say that here very shortly as we get into today's discussion. But truly, Gary, you are one of the best and brightest in the industry. We've talked a lot about it. A little intro and a little background on yourself to the audience, understanding why.
Yeah, so my name's Gary Fowler, and I'm the CEO, president, and co-founder of GSD Venture Studios and AI Venture Studios. I've done 15 startups. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which we sold for $1.35 billion about 7 months ago. I am the co-founder of Yva, which is one of the top 10 AI HR tech companies. And I'm just passionate about AI, as Kyle knows. I love it. I believe that the AI is the new electricity, and we need to embellish it. We need to jump into it. We need to embrace it. We need to understand it so that we can move forward. It's like the 1900s again, and imagine the effect that electricity had in the entire economy, from agriculture, manufacturing, et cetera. So I believe that. I've been a professor, an MBA professor, MIT Skolkovo professor in Russia. I love technology. I'm looking for incredible teams around the world that have the AI that's going to make a little dent in the universe. So thank you, Kyle.
Absolutely. And AI is the new electricity. We've said it here on every episode that Gary's been on and some that he hasn't. It is very true. And if you don't understand what that means right now and how important it is, just wait until this episode and we will unpack how powerful that plus the data that artificial intelligence is playing with and why that plays a role in everything that we're talking about. But without further ado, another old friend and a reoccurring guest, brilliant in the world of venture capital, which he won't give himself enough credit, but I will. Thilo, good sir, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and a very warm welcome from Berlin, Germany. And yeah, it's very excited to be here. My name is Thilo Bono, and I'm the founder and CEO of Piavo Public Relations, which is here in Europe the leading technology PR firm. We represent a lot of tech firms and VCs around the world, companies like Stripe, GitHub, Silicon Valley Bank, many of the tech heavyweights also here in Europe. And I'm also invested in more than 10 venture capital firms around the world, from Japan over Singapore to obviously the US and clearly Europe. And so I have a overview of what's going on in the world. And obviously VR, AR, AI is a super exciting topic. I think yesterday I played with my Oculus Quest table tennis, I think, against someone in Japan. So that always shows me every day how connected the world is and how realistic it feels. And I think, Kyle, you talked about sports in VR. I think there's now with boxing, with table tennis, with squash, etc., an entire fitness studio in VR already. So it's really, really powerful. That also combined, of course, with VR, with AI. That's really, really interesting and powerful. And I also personally using AI on a daily basis. For example, my entire scheduling for appointments, etc., is outsourced to AI. So it's a first-hand experience, and I can say it goes better and better every day.
There you go. That's I think the important thing to mention is how this is impacting our lives, but the fact that it's continuing to improve daily, which is very important for people to understand. We're in the early days in some cases, even though we've been working on from both AI and virtual reality, this technology for decades. In many cases, but we're still in its early days, which is exciting for all of us. Justin, I saw you shaking your head left and right, up and down, as Gary and Thilo were both introducing themselves and telling a little bit about their background. You got a big smile on your face. It's Tuesday. Welcome to the show. A little intro and background on yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle. No, I was laughing. Yeah, I mean, you stole a lot of my thunder. Just a lot of my talking points were just about some of the ways that AI being kind of that layer on top of everything is really going to allow everything that happened before to just go deeper and further than it ever had previously. And so a little background on me, kind of a weird background. I used to be in the Navy. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I'm a Columbia Business School student. I'm an associate at Charge Ventures. It's an early stage venture fund in New York City. We're generalist fund, but we like seeing the world in terms of where, much like this, where technology can be the wedge that drives change. And so every quarter we take a deep look at where that's happening. And so this quarter, it's synthetic media. And so that's something that I'm heading up for charge. And so we've been taking some really deep looks at kind of where, GANs and some of the kind of post-truth places that the industrialization of content is taking us. And so really happy to join some of you guys and talk about that.
Wonderful. I'm really excited to open up all of that as well. But before we get there, we got two more guests. Noble, my man, welcome back to the show. The brain behind the future of space travel, as we talked about on our last show around deep technology and investing in space, looking beyond the stars. Welcome back to the show, my friend. A little introduction and a little background on yourself as well.
Yeah, I have a unique background. I started off in the investment world initially as a broker, and then I evolved and had a hedge fund. And now, we focus on assisting a lot of companies to raise the capital they need to move forward. And we also started a early stage fund with M Accelerator called M Accelerator Venture One. But what's interesting is what got me from my semi-retirement, when I thought I was going to be done with investing, was a patent that I filed on utilizing and integrating augmented reality and virtual reality with physical clothing in items to create kind of a clothing to life model. The toy to life model. Well, we did the clothing to life model, and we filed it immediately after Pokemon Go. We had huge success with it. We had 2 successful Kickstarters. The initial raise for that particular venture was 1.5 million, and we've since continued to grow. We just had a pitch yesterday with a particular cartoon channel to take our clothing and our items and integrate them with a kind of a cartoon IP that we're in development with. So for me, I'm knee deep into the augmented reality, virtual reality space for the last 5 years. And I believe 100% that it is the wave of the future in conjunction with AI, because, augmented reality and virtual reality really doesn't work, to be honest, without visual science and the ability for computers to be able to analyze the information and then spit it back out. So this is a topic that literally is near and dear to my heart for the last 5 years, and I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Maybe we'll even jump back into that idea of space travel and where this all plays a role into it as well. And last but not least, Enrique, welcome to the show. Just the same as Justin, first timer. Pleasure to have you on our episode of VC TV today. A little introduction, a little background on yourself as well for the audience.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for inviting me, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm founding partner of Draper V1. We are a seed stage pre-series A fund located in Spain. So we are really good deal sourcing, like global ambitious entrepreneurs who are starting in Spain, and then we help them to become global leaders. We have invested so far like 100 startups, and we have some really good, nice, successful stories with more than 40x exit. And we are part of a Draper Venture Network. So we are a Draper fund. So there is 25 funds around the globe that we work together, and we share resources in Silicon Valley. And our alma mater is Tim Draper, who's been an early investor in more than 15 unicorns. And yeah, as I was hearing Gary and Tyler, I was like, yeah, it's that we are really, really in an amazing time that we are living now. It's not only about AI, that actually, I'm going to take that sentence that you say, AI is the new electricity, totally agree. But it's not that we are like in the beginning of the 900s again. Is that now we have much more things. We have a space, we have blockchain, we have VR, we have many other things. So it's really, really exciting moment to be in venture capital.
It is, and with that, I couldn't agree more. And I would love to kind of unpack where we are currently. So Enrique, I want to start back with you as you kind of teed that up. Is what is the current state of AI and virtual in terms of either reality, whether that be augmented, it's virtual, it's mixed. What is the current state of things from what you guys are seeing over at Draper?
Yeah, what we have seen here in our zone, like more close distance in our own portfolio in Draper V1, we have much more companies in AI and machine learning that we have in virtual reality or augmented reality or even in blockchain. But I think it's because probably, first is AI, and I think AI is totally ready to be into the market with the technology that we have and the computing, calculation, and processing that we have right now. And it should be in every company now, and it's not. So we have a lot of market to be developing these solutions and put it into the market just now. Probably in VR, for example, we have a really nice company called Easy Virtual Fair that is for virtual fairs, actually, and they are doing really great. And since COVID just came, they are even doing much more great. They sold in 3 months like 5 years revenues. And also virtual reality, I think, is something that is already ready, but it's, of course, it needs a lot of time of developers in order to do that virtual reality. Like it's more intense in time. So for us, most of the opportunities that we see is less scalable than other AI solutions that are in the market and so on. Augmented reality, I think, is even one step farther, and probably blockchain one step farther more away, because blockchain is a technology that is coming, but is still not mature enough. So it's for us difficult to see the projects that are actually really mature and that are accessing the market and having traction, real traction. So more or less, that is our point of view, how we see it in our 100 startup invested. But of course, Tim Draper, that is always one step ahead of us, he's really strong investing in space technology, and he's really strong investing in blockchain.
Right. And do you see maybe some of that being so far out because the infrastructure is still being laid, those roads are still being paved, if you will, that we're almost there, but just not quite because we need a few more pieces put in place?
Yeah, of course. I think it's that. I mean, the solution is there, but probably it's the market who is not ready yet. So we have to put those pieces in place in order for making more accessible and more really usable for the market.
Absolutely. And Noble, to you, same question. What's kind of the current state you're seeing, whether it be similar to Enrique, or are you seeing something different around, AI and VR and even the technologies in between?
Well, I think Enrique kind of hit the nail on the head near the end, and you really put it, it's really the adoption is the issue, right? It's not necessarily, I don't think it's really an infrastructure issue. With augmented reality, you can use any smartphone. In fact, the current smartphones that Apple created were designed with 2 cameras in order to be successful in utilizing AR. But when we were programming for augmented reality, we made it backwards compatible to iPhone 5s and 6s. So it's not so much the issue that I think that the technology and infrastructure is not there, is that people really can't find the right use case for it to make it practical. Snapchat did a great job. It became a $1 billion company being an augmented reality company, in which they did overlays, facial filters, modifications, and they did a great job of presenting one solid use case. But the problem is that is almost like drawing with crayons and using sticks and stones. That's like the most limited and most basic utilization of augmented reality, and they became a $1 billion company off of it. So I think that there's just to give you a personal example, when we did our Kickstarter, what we did was we did two versions. We did one where we animated children's T-shirts, and we created an interactive game in which you could actually throw food at the T-shirt, and that was successful. We raised, we did I think $100,000 on Kickstarter to implement that. Just a food fight, a virtual food fight, and it did really, really well. But the adoption into the marketplace and getting people to comprehend the interaction with clothing psychologically was the biggest hurdle. That people really liked it and they thought it was interesting, but they didn't realize that that you didn't have to use the t-shirts, but you could. So there's all these, individual understanding of the consumer of the project itself. We then did an application for UFC fighting. So we did a whole entire build out in which we created 3D avatars that actually battled in the room with players. And we had a full interactivity on augmented reality in which you could hit, punch, kick, and you could choose your fighters that were released. The biggest hurdle that we have at UFC is them just wrapping their mind around the ability to collect avatars, play them both tabletop and life size. It's the consumer. So us seeing on the front line for the last 4 years of us creating and developing different applications, it's not, and I almost say it's not even the consumer, it's the businesses who have direct access to the consumers that have a hard time really wrapping their minds around all the availability and functionality that augmented reality can do. And I think that, and I'm always going to be a fan of AR over just VR. I think that there's, I think XR, the term extended reality plays best. But the idea that you don't have to fully spend millions and millions of dollars to create submersive worlds that virtual reality kind of forces you to do. I think AR has some really solid opportunities. I just think that we just need that hit app that goes beyond the Snapchat filter that'll kind of capture people's imagination and just make it accessible. So, Vuforia is one of the best companies out there. I mean, they've been at it for years, creating industrial applications for VR and AR particularly, and they've done a great job in the industrial side. And so there's been a lot of industrial adoption of it. But it's just the idea of getting the consumer to feel most confident to step into that space and just realize that they can interact with it. But once that happens, it'll literally be Web 3.0. Google Glass showed us that being able to look at the world in one moment and capture everything. People are interested in it, and we see all the time in science fiction, the drive is that's going to be the opportunity where people see Web 3.0 around the world, no more going to a terminal.
Right, and I think Glass, Google Glass in particular was just a starting point. That was a progression from many other technologies and trial and errors. And you're right. I mean, looking at Pokemon Go, even for instance, and before that and before Glass, looking at the idea of QR codes and how those were bringing artificial intelligence, AR, augmented reality to life. Now, look at what Pokemon Go did and Niantic Studios and bringing that in a world that has become obsessed with an outstanding game that connects those two and mixes those two in some way. But I think you're right. Use case is a very big opportunity. I see Gary and Tilo and Justin shaking their head. But Justin, to you, what are you seeing as the current state as well from your side? I mean, we've got use cases. To Enrique's point, we're still laying those roads, that infrastructure. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Google Glass, I mean, the consumer-facing version went away, but it never went away. It just went into factories, right? Like the use case for factories, the consumer-facing version disappeared, but I mean, they converted the UI and then it just went into factories, and I forget the exact rollout, but I mean, Google Glass didn't disappear; it just went off shelves. And so it's interesting that that the B2B case was always there. And so when we were talking in the intro about some of these industries, I think some of the AR or the XR, I really like that. Some of the XR stuff that I think consumers interact with, whether it's ping pong across the world or kind of game mechanics, that's kind of the immediate or like kind of the low level use cases are kind of obvious. The ones that we've been playing with that are really interesting are kind of the initial kind of pieces of that layer, like in agriculture, right? You have interfaces with satellites, and you have interfaces that are telling farmers when to plant, and not just when to plant, but where to plant, right? Based on hydrology and satellite imagery that's updated in real time, and which part of their field should lay fallow. And so to me, it's interesting that you're seeing this whole integration across every vertical. in an economy, and not just, the B2C interfaces that, tech is like kind of used to dealing with. And then for me, like we've been playing a lot with like GPT-3 and like thinking about like the implications there, and like kind of buried in that information, which, I mean, that's such an interesting, you have this like kind of 2x yield over GPT-2, and like what that means, and like people kind of like ripping through that. And it's like a very cool, I don't know how much, I mean, you guys are probably much more knowledgeable
but
about
for the
this,
audience, but real quick for the audience, what is GP2 and 3? What is that? If you could just explain that real quick for the audience.
Sure. So I will explain it at my level. So so which is the kind of, I'll give you the Navy SEAL version. So there's this alliance called the OpenAI Alliance that's designed to open source AI tools. And so the best way to do that is to pool resources. And so the first version scraped the internet for as much information as possible. And the idea being that as you pooled information and resources, you would get better at doing that. So GPT-3 is the third version of doing that. So as you've done that, and feel free to correct me, guys, if I'm wrong on this, but the third version of doing this, you're seeing more information get scraped. You're seeing better information being used through natural language processing, or NLP, or NLP, excuse me. And so, but what's interesting is like buried in this research report, which is on the XPT or API V, the preprint pre-publication review server right now, is this like kind of result, which I highlighted because I wanted to bring it up during this. Is they said a more fundamental limitation of the general approach is that scaling up may eventually run into the limits of the pre-training objective. So like more stuff in the space may not, like they're already like kind of reaching the limitations of just jamming more stuff in there. So it's interesting, like it's like we're kind of reaching the limits of just more stuff in the bag. So like we have to get kind of smarter about how we sort. And it's like an interesting kind of idea, right? And like how does that like extrapolate out to not just like how you organize, and like very much like a computer architecture, like how does that get organized down into the data? Not to pull this off topic, but into those verticals, right?
Yeah. No, and appreciate you unpacking that as well. And Gary, I see your hand going up, but I don't know if it's you or Morpheus, and which one is controlling which, and we're going to get to Morpheus in a bit. But to you, before we get to Thilo, what are you seeing as current state following on to this? Because natural language processing, the architecture to the use cases to the infrastructure. I mean, there's still so much that has to be done. But look, you're living and breathing this, or being told to breathe when you're supposed to. So what are you seeing as this current state? Oh, Gary, that's to you.
So from my standpoint, I mean, think about amazing amount of data that's around us every single day. I mean, Alvin Toffler said it's infobesity. The amount of data that we each have in our own personal clouds is about 300,000 items. The amount of websites on the World Wide Web in 1996 was 257,000. So each one of us here has more items than the entire web in 1996. Think of all the data repositories that we each have. Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, Slack, etc. It's incredible. How in the world, in our own personal universe, how do we each control the data? How many times each week do you say, I know that file exists, but I can't find it? Why? I've either forgotten the keywords or the location. It's crazy, right? So we have some of the brightest minds in the world on this call, and people say the same thing. Oh, I don't remember getting it. And so we've got to really structure for artificial intelligence to help and assist us in a basic kind of things, because we are in a state of infobesity. Today, it's 300,000 items. That number doubles every year. In 5 years, it'll be 10 million items. How in the world are we going to be able to control our own destiny? So we need to look at some of these fundamental problems. We need artificial intelligence to be able to guide us, to be able to be the Morpheuses of the world, to be able to help us and assist us. And that's where we are today.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if we can't even handle our schedule, how are we, let alone going to handle that much data? I mean, it's true. And again, audience, we're coming back to Morpheus. This is not just the matrix we're talking about here. There's much more to unpack on what Morpheus is. Thilo, to you, before we get into the further technicals, which we're getting to, as everyone's mentioning, what are you seeing as this current state of AI and virtual, our new reality, if you will, and not just because of the last 6 months, but going forward? This is something that was coming ahead, right? We've all dreamt of the idea of the Oasis from Ready Player One. Just a little fun little fact. But we've all talked about this, right? We've seen pieces of this. The joke of I made before early in the episode of VR being the next Peloton. You know, Peloton really has done a good job of virtually connecting us in a way of exercising. Step, not fully, but a step, all puns intended, in the right direction. So as both an investor and as an entrepreneur, where are you seeing this current state of everything?
I mean, I'm of course seeing in my role as a PR and communication expert also that a lot of companies coming and of course want to jump on the AI wagon. And of course you have to then ask, is it just good software or is it actually AI, right? So, I mean, this is still, we are in the phase that not everything that everyone who claims is AI inside, it's sometimes just a good piece of software, a good algorithm, let's say it that way. So first of all, so we are often, I think, in our bubble, a bit more far in the future than actually the reality that I see the entrepreneurs that are working every day here into my door. On the other hand, of course, I see that in B2B, there are much more concrete cases right now than in B2C for sure. I mean, what I see in B2B technologies is it's really amazing when it comes to, for example, managing, for example, energy usage in factories. When it comes to concrete B2B use cases, it's really amazing what already is happening. Much more use cases that I see in B2C in general. And also here, from my personal experience as an entrepreneur, helping generating visibility for tech entrepreneurs, I see it every day. We have, for example, just implemented a tool that, based on AI, suggests the right influencers. So you can say, okay, that's what I'm doing. What are the best influencers that I should work with, right? And then they combine it, matching it with the competition, finding out the right hashtags, who you should connect with, etc. Also, when it comes to text, right? I mean, there are entire machines that can write the latest, whatever, sports news or reporting on the stock market without human touch, right? So there are already cases, and it's also here is a long way to go. It's of course not there yet, where it's on a stadium where you have never to put on your brain and actually judge if it really makes sense. But you see every day that gets better and better and better. And when you think maybe 3-4 years in the future, in combination with things like quantum computing, for example, right? Because we know obviously AI is all about data, and the more data you can process and the more sources you have, etc., you get the results. And that will be, of course, another step in the acceleration. And when you look at here in Berlin, for example, one guy here from the Siemens family, Björn from Siemens, who builds surgical AI, which really connects all the data that you have in the surgical room in the hospital, right? So you have not just blood pressure monitoring and these kind of things, you have all these kind of data that comes from all ends of the body, from all the pictures that you're doing, from all the measurements, from all the medicines that you're taking, etc. And really helping the doctor to really make sense of it and really compare it also with other patients, what happened to them, etc. And so I think in hospitals, that's already reality, to connect all these streams of data and really helping not just the doctor, but also, of course, in the end of the day, the patient, to making better decisions and for the healing process, and that maybe things go faster and that you have lower rates of mistakes that happen, things like that, right? And when you then combine it with, let's say, AR, that, for example, imagine the doctor has like eyeglasses and all the data that should, like blood pressure and all these kind of things, just directly in front of him, and not relies on other people running around him and the human brain. I think there are a lot of things that are in the very close near future that really can change all of our lives, and it's really have a concrete impact on all of our lives. And it's very exciting, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Everyone's shaking their head, including myself. We see that exciting future, but I think there are still some missing building blocks, to this. Is how do we get there, right? We're all talking about, and Noble, I see you right there. Just a second. So we talk about all this data, and all this data that we have, and we've also talked previously on VCTV about how data is also perishable, right? It can be skewed. So perishable in the sense that if it's not timely, sometimes historical data can be irrelevant. And then in terms of where and how it's being used, that's another problem. But now that we have all this data, how do we process it? How do we connect those dots so that we can get to that future sooner than later? And what are some of these missing building blocks that are acting as areas of opportunity for people to build or invest in as well? And Enrique, you brought up infrastructure, so get ready to talk about that. And before we get there, Noble, kind of millions and billions and trillions and quadrillions of data points that need to come together to be processed quickly and actually understood to take this reality. How far, or what are we missing to make that happen?
Well, I think, excuse me, as I guess futurists and investors who look forward to the next phase, I think that there's also the warning signs too, right? So, when GPT-2 came out, the reason why the reason they didn't want to release the software, the open source, was because they were worried it was going to create fake news. And so we start looking at the secondary component of this, that there is a lot of data, but we talked about the medical issues. There's HIPAA compliance. So there's a lot of privacy issues that start to come in when we start filtering a lot of this data through, and I don't mean to turn to an AI conversation, but AI in general, or when we step into, I had a guest on my show the other day for the internet who does IoT, Internet of Things. The idea of us having these screens where we're talking to each other is fast going to be eliminated. We went from tubes to flat screens to, the idea of having, and then they have the technology, a contact lens. So we're going to have to be able to communicate not only with the data, but with the things in the world around us, because screens are going to be obsolete fairly soon. But there's always just, and then when we look at it, the biggest concern that I always have is who controls that data, that the information that's being poured in, who's analyzing it, who's controlling it, and then who's monetizing it. And this has been the biggest concern. Not that we don't have the technology, but the moral and ethical infrastructure is still having a hard time to catch up with all the information that we can even synthesize. It's great to be able to figure out if one medication impacts another person. I did my 23andMe. 23andMe is founded by one of the Google Y founders. And so my data is sitting with Google, regardless of whether it's quote unquote separate, but my ancestry and genetic data is sitting there. So there's all this data, but we still have yet to come up with a way for, one, the people with the data, the individuals, to successfully monetize their own data, and then two, to be truthfully in control of that data. So, when we talk about the infrastructure, I think that that's really a component of it that has to be understood and really integrated into all these conversations. Because at the end of the day, it's great to be pure scientist, pure futurist, and think that everything is egalitarian and things will be done for the people's best benefit and for us to be hopeful and optimistic. But the dark side of that is really the biggest concern. And, the reason why Facebook had to go in front of Congress and why GDRP was created, who is really watching the watchers? And that's really the only infrastructure component I think that really needs to be paid attention to. The science will solve itself. The rest of it, the human side, is where the concern is.
Gary.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing from my own personal perspective. I hear every day people are concerned about privacy, but those are the same people that are using Google and Facebook. It's insane. And, they're wondering why if they talk on their phone or they're looking something up or talking to somebody, something happens to appear on Facebook. Oh, I didn't know I needed that motorcycle part. Isn't that funny? It just came up. It's crazy because we're too cheap to pay. And the situation, we're so used to getting things for free, not understanding that they're trying to deeply understand everything that we do. And in some ways, it's not a bad thing. I like it because things that come up that I really want, it makes it easier for me. But we have to get to a point. Noble's right in terms of owning our own data and monetizing it in whatever way, shape, or form, tokens or whatever. But at the same time, we got to understand if we're using things for free, they're going to do something with it. Hello, Google's not such a multi-billion-dollar company for no reason, right? So we've got to understand that's what happens. So in a sense, of my standpoint, it's like an assistant. It makes life easier because you're getting the things you want and like presenting to you. Your life changes, and all these AI assistants are there to make our life a little bit better.
And a contrarian view to that is, are we actually ready for that as a society? And I think there's a lot of questions to be had in the next couple of years of, are we ready to handle the idea of owning or monetizing or controlling our own data? Because while someone may be quick to respond, yes, we are, think about this for a second, and to our audience, this is a big opportunity area for those listening is, when you get into health data, it's one thing to understand certain data points around your health, but think about your entire life's medical history. And what if you accidentally share that somewhere? What kind of impact? You don't know, right? You don't know where that could go. You don't know what kind of impact that could have. Same with all of these other areas. We have a lot of data, and Enrique, I see you. We have a lot of data that we hold sensitively and others hold for us very fortunately at the moment. Now back to Noble and Gary's point is, we need to understand how to better leverage and control that. But it's a lot of data that we may have access to control in the future. And it's still going to be interesting to see how and what that data is that we start to unleash and control. So Enrique, I don't want to take your thunder, so go ahead.
No, it's really interesting, the point that you are talking about, that is kind of like, okay, Noble said, okay, take control of your data and have the control of your data. But what we have seen is, instead of putting the money in the bank, then you have Bitcoins and you have your own control and custody of your money. No one else have the key code. You cannot go back to the bank and say, oh, I forgot my code. Can you give it me back so I can
customer
get my
service money? Customer service does not exist
exactly
in a self-ownership world.
How many people has lost his cryptocurrencies because he just lost the key code? So as you said, imagine that happened with your health track record, your medical record. Oh, sorry, I lost it. Well, okay, we have to start over again, or what? Can you have the same illness again so we can evaluate it? So
come in for a checkup. Let's start this again.
Exactly.
But to Gary's point too, and I'll just say this real quick to that is, to Gary's point, artificial intelligence can play a very unique role around assistance and holding true to some of that data and making sure you're making smarter decisions, or we are making smarter decisions. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that technology is getting faster and faster, and we have to mature and learn how to use this technology as a society. And that is a really, really big challenge. So this, the first part of the question you asked about the infrastructure, and this reminds me when I was a kid and I had my video game, and then it was a new video game, but my computer didn't have the processing power to that new video game. So, but it was already in the market, the new computer to do that, no? And so but this pace has been now more faster and faster, and it's getting more challenging to keep the pace with the technology. And it's not something just about getting the right technology, but it's something that the society has to learn how to actually deal with that data, share that data, control that data. And of course, also we have another big challenge in cybersecurity, because we are talking about what we do in being good persons and thinking good, but there is some people there that is black hat. So it's really, really challenging there as data growth and technology goes. It's really a big challenge.
Justin, I see you shaking your head left and right, up and down again. I mean, you're like a video game controller over there. You're just up, down, left, right, all over the place.
No, there's nothing to disagree with. It's just funny, right? Because it's like Bitcoin is like held out. It's, created by this anonymous person or group of people, and it's this kind of fixed asset, and everyone knows the rules in theory. And we've made some investments in companies that are built on the Bitcoin architecture and use it to do things like create video compression and move things around and use blockchain. And so, but it's interesting. I just think that it's funny, like when we look at GDPR, and that you can make the AI layer and the VR layer or XR layer as good as you want, but if it's built on shaky human institutions, like it's almost like you have to buff up that human government layer as well. And so I don't know, like probably not the like the tech forum for that, but it's like, it's like that's something that doesn't get enough attention. But like, you can have the best interface in the world, the best AI, the best, and if it's pushing the most secure encrypted data, but it's just human, and if you don't have privacy protections that start and stop at the doctor's office, if there's no expectation of personal privacy in your society, or that all of that's gone, or it's just formalities like we've seen in the United States. Some of these things have just been norms. They're not laws, right? In the last couple of years have shown that these have just been norms. They're not laws. Some of these things that we've taken for granted. And so it's just interesting that it's almost like you have to upgrade your human structures as much as your data layer at the same time. That's just what I wanted to add too.
Yeah, it's completely a mind. Yeah, it's completely a mind shift, right? There's a lot that has to be had. This is not a one-day turnaround. I mean, it's not like when the internet was first introduced into our lives on a mass scale, right? And the idea of getting online to access all information, or sending an email, or going to a website to process something or buy something. This is very, very fundamental shift in our way of thinking and acting, which to Enrique's point is something we need to catch up to, and it's going to be a very long road in some cases to change. And we're seeing some tests which are proving different results all around, as Enrique brought up good points. But security, so let's talk about that. AI, virtual data, reality. Security threats are rising faster than we realize. And there's new cybersecurity threats that are coming to scale, and concerns that we need to be aware of. So where does security really play a role in these two technologies as they begin to intersect? And that's AI and VR. And Gary, why don't you start us off, if you could, around the power and benefits of really what security is going to play, and how do we
Yeah. I actually wrote an article with the former chief security officer at Apple, Rick Orloff, about cybersecurity. So it's just, I mean, you look at it from my perspective, and having the AI to be able to forecast where there are vulnerabilities and to be able to defend against it. I mean, this is a chicken and the egg thing all the time now, right? Mm-hmm. So having that kind of AI, so now we've got to continually evolve and change that AI security so it's able to meet the threat and forecast where it's going to be. Before it was just responding, now it's forecasting. And so today, using, migrating to the point of unsupervised AI that really on its own is trying to plug the holes before they become holes. So we've got a lot of challenges in front of us. At the same time, we've got incredible opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think those opportunities are what's so exciting ahead, right? But protecting ourselves, again, continues to be this topic of conversation. And
isn't that, Kyle, isn't that what AI does? It's going to help us with our health too, to be able to forecast where there's problems and to be able to prevent the problems before they become problems. Really, that's what AI is all about. it's about, it's almost like a guardian angel.
It is. And that's, so I'm pushing the dark side here, and Justin, I see there is a very light side as well, if you will, right? Let's talk about the force, but there is a good and potentially, troubling side to artificial intelligence. On the good side, it can learn, it can be helpful, it can adapt, it can improve efficiency ourselves, right? It can optimize us as if we're machines here, but it can. There is a little bit of a dark side, which is a lot, I think, more unknown to us. And you're bringing up great points. There's things that it can really improve in our lives. And Justin, I don't want to take away any more from you, so go ahead.
No. All I was going to say, I mean, just that AI, there's like that joke in machine learning where I'm sure you guys have heard this, but the teacher asked the machine learning program, like, well, would you do that if all your friends did it? And it says yes. And I think the danger is with AI that it's going to do what it's programmed to do, right? And the learned behaviors are what it learns are right and wrong. And there are all these studies that show that biases are built in by their creators, and that's true with behaviors as well, right? So, and it can be a guardian angel, but it's going to be programmed to guard what Noble's point about who watches the Watchmen or who watches the Watchers, like it's going to be programmed to do what it's meant to do. And that if you're on the receiving end and that's okay, then that's okay. But if not, then it's like the kind of benevolent AI. It's so building in again that like those good human kind of touch points. And we've seen some of this already with some of these justice initiative algorithms, which I think come from a place where people want transparency and you want to move away from a cash bail system, New Jersey and some US states where, hey, this algorithm is going to determine it. We're going to take people out of the loop. And then we're seeing some decisions that I would say some folks would say are questionable. And they go back and they say, well, that's proprietary. We can't show you the inside of the black box. And that I would say seems unfair to some people. And so it just, you end up with these interesting, to put it mildly, these interesting outcomes, which are affecting people who, you could say are incarcerated or they're going to be incarcerated, or there are already people who they would be affected that way either way. But when it's an AI that's making choices like which way traffic's getting routed on a bridge, or, the trolley problem, or any of these other kind of higher level decisions, all the way up to, decisions about milling on, screw sizes that determine, stuff that you truly go really deep on industrial production for a wider society, or it just says, hey, you can't have so many kids because, my objective is to maximize happiness for humanity. There's too many people here, right? So I was programmed, right? Like you've hit the upper limit, so less people are required.
It brings in this. It brings in a good conversation we talked about yesterday around emotional intelligence, and then also, Gary's written a number of articles. Noble, we talked about this on our last episode around deep tech and the idea that artificial intelligence, there can be this emotional intelligence that's added in that helps us kind of relate on some similar levels and help behavioral decisions being made as well, which could be a very interesting progression. And Gary, we were talking a little offline about this, but I know you have a comment, and then I got a few big questions to ask as we're coming to the lightning round. So go ahead, Gary.
No, I just, the situation is we're at a stage right now as we're moving to unsupervised AI and consciousness and really creating I don't want to say a soul, but a soul. And if we look at it a little bit differently, I've written a few articles in Forbes also about consciousness and AI. And I really believe that we're at that point where we're going to bring more in. As David, my partner, says, we're bringing neurotransmitters in for Morpheus, right? To be able to have a consciousness, to be able to compassion. And it's one of the things, a lot of it is about the training set. So as we're moving to unsupervised AI, how was it trained? Was it trained in a good way? Was it trained in a bad way? How was it upbringing? So part of our thing is, our challenge is to make sure that the training sets are done the right way. So when it does start to make those decisions, that it's in our best interest.
Absolutely. And we look at Clippy, one of our first early assistants 20 plus years ago. And, Clippy was very basic, but programmed for the good. And I think is a joke I make, but to your point, I think you're absolutely right, Gary. Enrique, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll try to be short, but hearing Justin and Gary, it reminds me that Stephen Hawking was actually a really hater of artificial intelligence, because he said it's a really powerful weapon that the people, the community is not ready to handle. Because in order to make the best of artificial intelligence, we need a total goodness society, while in fact, every time that we walk, every time that the world is moving, instead of being more goodness, there looks like there is more egocentric. And as Justin said, the technology is going to do what the people say the technology to do. So in order to actually let this conscious that Gary talked about and be at their own, we need actually first as a community to end with those black thoughts or those dark spaces.
Absolutely, and I want to pull the conversation back, because we've focused a lot on reality and the changes that we're having, and then artificial intelligence. And again, as I mentioned, audience, this plays a fundamental role in everything we're doing, including virtual reality and our realities going forward. So that's why it's such an important topic that we're covering, and even some of these areas of change as well. I want to come back to the bigger picture of virtual reality, right? We've talked a lot about the intersection here. Now, as investors, where are you seeing the opportunity areas to really start making and placing bets around the future of virtual, and I'll throw in augmented or mixed realities, and maybe a little bit of AI, as I know that's, again, Gary's forte. So Enrique, let's start with you. Where are you seeing the opportunities to begin investing and or building in the virtual reality space?
I mean, of course, virtual reality is being bigger and bigger thing in video games. So I think there is a big space right now there. Just because Second Life in the time didn't work, that doesn't mean that right now you have a lot of different video games approach that is really, really similar, and they are really working. So I think in that sense, is something that is going to be still there. And you mentioned also as an augmented reality, Pokemon Go as well. So I think those are the spaces that first they are entering. Also in the B2B side, as we said previously, there are some application and use cases that are actually right now also going and working. So I think it's more or less those are the spaces that probably from there we are going to colonize other segments.
Thilo, how about over to yourself as well? Where are you as an investor, or some of those funds that you're working with, or even from the PR side, where are you seeing the opportunities to start placing bets and building in the virtual and future reality spaces?
I mean, on the consumer side, definitely in the space of everything what comes to health and fitness, right? I mean, I made this little example with table tennis, right? But I think there's much more coming, entire courses and classes where you pay subscription, like, for example, you pay with Netflix or with your fitness studio, and then get everything virtually connected, and virtual trainer and virtual kind of guidance because of all the sensors that are obviously built into this. Definitely something where I feel that could be, it's potential, if you do it right, becoming the next big, like a fitness chain, or that Netflix for sports, things like that. Peloton, I think you mentioned. When it comes to B2B, I definitely see a lot of great use cases in the industrial tech space, when it comes really to areas where today a lot of, I would say, IoT and robotics and this area that's definitely in B2B space where it's urgently needed, because still there are so many data generated from the machines, from all the customers that are, etc. So I think that's on the B2B side, definitely in the area of industrial tech, big opportunities, and we're looking right now on several cases in this field. So I think that both on B2C and B2B, great opportunities ahead of us.
Absolutely. And I think that that's, one area we haven't had a chance to touch on, but we did talk a little bit about in our previous panel earlier today on VCTV about the areas around where, AI, blockchain, and also virtual reality or even augmented reality, right? It's a little bit of telepresence, but also physical presence, where those are playing a role in the industrial space. So, and robotics as well. So great mentioning, Thilo. Noble, to you, where are you seeing the opportunities as you're building and potentially investing in this space as well?
Yeah, so I think people forget that the personal computer, the home computer, started in the workplace, and then it went out to consumer. And I think that that's kind of been our approach. While we created video games, and we still have our company that we own a significant part of that does augmented reality games, a lot of the focus is really towards finding projects that are more B2B and more practical application, so that people can, if it's used at work, they'll want to use it at home. So a lot of the stuff we're looking at is the medical usage of augmented reality, surgical AR, which is an overlay platform, a HoloLens we've looked at as just an overall investment play. There's a lot of space in the AR arena that I think that if anyone wants to invest, and even in some of the companies that we've been talking to, they have attached AR with Internet of Things, so that when large, whether it's a oil rig or whether it's a large industrial factory, they can actually connect directly with the chips that give the calibrated data in the machine back to them and feed it through the AR lenses. So these kind of approaches really where I find the most exciting, most fascinating usage, because they're not price sensitive and it's a requirement of the work. So that's really the focus for what we're doing.
Justin.
Yeah, I mean, places we're looking right now, similar, I guess the only thing I'd add to that, kind of the last comment is just looking, kind of, we think the same way, like it's going to show up in, B2B before it shows up in B2C due to price sensitivities, but really it's where can you, because of the nature of enterprise and the nature of kind of the way that the internet has allowed kind of the unbundling of services, so you can give like a freemium, or you can do a premium for B2B and like kind of roll out a lower cost or free to try model for consumers. Where can the two layers interact? So, and where can you find a lower, or where can you find integration points where AI VR or AI AR, is providing that additional value point, whether it's data architecture or it's kind of just solving pain points that already exist, whether it's in insurance, data structures itself. So the problem earlier that Gary mentioned about dealing with stuff, just the nature of stuff in people's lives. So we've like made an investment that hasn't flipped over yet, just about how the world is organized and the nature of stuff. And like that investment is very much just about reorganizing just the very nature of stuff. And so that's kind of how we think about it, is where can that kind of that next incremental point come from? And then how can you kind of align the B2B, B2C, like through the enterprise because of the unbundling of services. So you can kind of do both. And then you can bring consumers up, first adapters, and then potentially people who are going to either try it themselves. And then whether they're 1099s or they're folks who are starting their own businesses, they can come up through the stack and kind of drag folks up with them. Then it's good. Then it's good too. But that's kind of
the future of work. Good wild card. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so we won't be able to unpack that. But we will have you back to talk about that. Gary, to you, what areas of opportunity are you seeing in the virtual space right now that we can take advantage of?
Yeah. So my company that I co-founded, Yva, is working. A couple of years ago, we talked about remote workers, and so it's an AI company that helps manage remote workers. I think this is an opportunity of a lifetime today to develop technology to really enhance the experience for remote workers. We're not going to be using this. Who knows when this is going to end? We've now gone through the digital transformation. Let's make that experience, that work experience, better. Let's bring AR and VR and AI right here for us. So we have holographic images. So we have that kind of personalized experience so we can do our job better.
Absolutely. So gentlemen, we're at our closing time here, and I want to get to closing thoughts, but Don't wave goodbye just yet, Justin. You still have a few more minutes. It's
okay.
It's with the closing thoughts. I would love to hear your closing thoughts, and of course, as we do here on every episode of VC TV, where everyone can find you, because this is more than just sharing information. It's also building those relationships and allowing our audience to be able to interact with us, as we are no longer able to interact face to face at the moment in person. So we do want to make sure everyone can reach out and connect with us each individually. So before your closing thoughts and where can people find you, I do have one fun question in our lightning round, and that is, what year, okay, these are always fun, what year do you think virtual reality will become a staple in our daily lives? And I'm not talking necessarily about the Oasis of Ready Player One, but we can play with that. So where do you see, what year do you see as your prediction? Fun little game here, and then closing thoughts and where can everyone find you? So Enrique, you're really deep in thought, so I'll come to you last. Don't worry. Tilo, let's start with you. When do you think your prediction is around virtual reality in our daily lives? Closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
I think it's much closer than we all think. It's, I think, maybe 2 to 3 years where it really implements in all of our daily lives. Like we have our mobile phone with us. I mean, as I say, I have every morning my table tennis round, so it's already part of my life in the present. But I think mass market adoption, 2 to 3 years definitively. And to find me, on LinkedIn is always the best, but you can also find me on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. So wherever you feel comfortable, feel free to connect. And LinkedIn's, I think, always the best case. And as I have to run to my next meeting, I thank you also for having me again.
And I thank you as well, Tilo. And Tilo, I'll say this to the audience. For those that tuned into our last episode around social networking and investors, this man right here will respond to you. All social networks he just gave you, feel free to reach out to him, pitch him, talk to him, get the best advice you can around PR. This man right here. Tilo, thank you very much. I know you got to run.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Justin, your prediction, closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Yeah. So I think early adapters are already playing with, they're already playing with Oculus. They're already kind of, the use cases are the low-hanging fruit. But in some ways, I mean, COVID, just like telemedicine, has accelerated those trends by about a decade. I mean, here we are, we're having this virtual event right now, and it's 2020. So I don't know. I mean, it depends on your perspective and what counts as virtual. So I would say, you could say 2020. I mean, if you're talking headsets and the Oculus, it's probably a little farther away. But I mean, I started a job virtually. I mean, I know people that have started jobs virtually and that will start school virtually. And so just like it continues until we have back. But some of those things will be really sticky and hard to give up, whether people are moved or they're telecommuting or doing telemedicine stuff. I think we've already kind of seen the beginning of it, if not the, I think we're well out of phase 0. And as far as getting in touch, Charge, we're always interested in talking to people who are building new things. And you can find us at charge.vc, and I'm on Twitter, and we're on Twitter, and we're on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out. And we're always interested in talking to people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Justin. Noble, to you, your prediction, quick closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so I guess my prediction is, it took full 10 years before really smartphones became ubiquitous, right? We had the brick phones, and then it became now the smartphone around, And so I say the same thing. I'll say full adoption or commercial utilization is about 10 years fully away. So I'd say 2030. Not saying that there won't be roadblock, milestones along the way, but as far as everyone, an elimination of the concept of a screen, full AR in the next decade. And then as far as reaching out to me, LinkedIn is always the best. We're always partnering up with other accelerators and VC groups, and we're in the middle of raising for our fund. So LinkedIn, just type in my name, it's easy to find me, as well as, you can find me by my last name on Instagram and Twitter as well. So it's easy to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. Enrique, same to you. Your prediction, closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Okay, yeah, I totally agree with Justin and everything was said before. I mean, more or less, we have in 2020 already virtual reality with us. We see also in Zoom people with the virtual backgrounds, and we talk about Pokemon Go. We talk about Tylo talk about the virtual ping pong, and so I think more or less it's already here, but it's going step by step. So if I don't know if you refer that to wear like the Google glasses, everyone going with Google glasses around town and connecting, that probably it's going to take a little bit longer. And I don't know if it would be something like that, like the Oculus or the Google or the Google glasses, but yeah, it's something that is here and is here to stay. So I think it's just step by step, and as we said before, it's just to be finding the use cases that actually make sense to address every time, like and put those bricks. And yeah, I'm really glad we at Draper V1 to hear everyone, and you can find me at LinkedIn, also at our through our website. And if the only thing is that as we are overwhelmed about data and communication, if you address to us, then tell what are you looking for and how can we help you and help each other. So.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Gary. Last but not least, closing thoughts, your prediction, and where can everyone find you?
The digital transformation started at the beginning with a huge impact of COVID. 92% of the companies 6 months ago by McKinsey said that they were looking at digital transformation strategies. We are here. The virtual world is here. It started, we're part of it, and it's going to be gradual. And I agree, as Noble said, probably 10 years from now, it'll be fully adapted, but we're here. The companies that want to be truly successful are the ones that are going to take advantage of this opportunity of a lifetime. So this virtual world exists. We're here. You can reach me. So my company is GSD, Get Shit Done Venture Studios. So you can reach me at gsdvs.com, Gary at gsdvs. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a show, Silicon Valley AI and Tech. You're welcome to come to my show. I have incredible guests from around the world. You can reach me LinkedIn, all over. So check out. I have a lot of articles I write about AI, and I'd love to communicate with you. So here we are. Just get stuff done and take advantage of the opportunity.
It's get shit done, as he said on previous episodes. He's censoring it today. It's Tuesday. Let loose. Guys, thank you very much. And to our audience, some of the articles mentioned today, including Gary's, I'll make sure I put in the show notes afterwards. Make sure you do tune into Gary's show, shameless plug, because Morpheus and what we didn't get a chance to talk about today is uncovered. And that's the idea, really showing the future, which is now, of what smart assistants really can be, leveraging the data and technology that's here and more to what is coming. But definitely check out Enrique, Noble, Tilo, and Justin as well online in their respective companies, and make sure you reach out to them if you're interested, not just talking with them, but also maybe presenting your company, your idea, or co-investing with them in some way, shape, or form. And as I do here on every episode, a big thank you to Elena, to the entire LaToken team for bringing this episode together for VCTV. If you like what you heard, make sure to give us a thumbs up, click subscribe. And I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. We'll be back here in just about 60 seconds with a keynote from another great investor and entrepreneur who we've had here talking about the changing around this future of connectivity and powering the world around energy, AI, and connected devices. With that, gentlemen, I will let you drop. Audience, we'll be back here in 60 seconds. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Hi, Kyle.
Hey, Efron, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Let me welcome everybody. We are live, so
Okay.
we're already going to jump in here. So hi, everybody. Welcome back. We shortened our 60 seconds to 30-second break because why not? It's Tuesday. Let's have some fun and continue this discussion of how artificial intelligence, data, and the connected world is empowering us, because we've got a special guest and a growing dear friend of mine. I'm so excited to welcome back to the show to talk about not just what we covered in our last 2 episodes here on VCTV, but again, looking at the future. We've talked a lot with him about blockchain, about Internet of Things, about edge and the future of connectivity. Now we're going to look at how the future will be powered, or powering the future, as Ifran calls it. And so I'm your host today. I'm Kyle Ellicott. Really excited to have you back here on VCTV. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up, click subscribe. Thank you, Elena, and to the entire LaToken team for bringing VCTV to you and all of your screens around the world. And with that, Ifran, I want to welcome you. I'm going to turn off the camera, go on mute, and let you control the show. We've got your screen live and clear, and I'll come back with questions in case the audience or myself have any at the end.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join into this interesting topic that we have chosen for LaToken. So, my name is Irfan. By background, I've spent over a decade in research. I've been involved in investment, as well as have been a serial entrepreneur building companies. As of right now, my real focus area is in the field of energy. And why energy, right? So for starters, when we talk about, powering the future, we are talking about sustainability. We're talking about the key challenges that we are facing. We are talking about the evolution of our revolution that we are going through right now. So the key challenges that we are facing around energy today is that energy is in finite supply. The energy that we depend upon has got, issues such as depletion of resources. So when we talk about, energy, the highest amount of energy that's being used today is the fossil fuels. And that itself is going to run out. So according to data and reports that we have, it says that we're going to run out of the fossil fuel energy by the next 50 years. So if you classify this fossil fuel energy between oil, gas, and coal, the highest of them is coal. That's going to run, according to data, for about 70 years. Oil is going to almost run out in 30 years, and gas in about 40 years. Now, that being said, of course, considering the pandemic, what we have noticed is that situation or catastrophic situation can be escalated. We can plan, we can, look at multiple data and reports, and that can say that, and can prepare us for a challenge. But when the challenge really comes to us, we cannot tell. So as the pandemic have shown us that, we have been preparing for digital adoption for some time. But today, right now, it's not about preparing. It's just getting in there, because this is a requirement. As we are all here dialing in from different parts of the world, utilizing digital medium, which we would have used in any other time, we wouldn't be using this, not as widespread as we are using. The second important aspect of energy that we face today is the environmental impact. I mean, climate change is not coming. Climate change is here. We have already seen, global warming, as well as other problems around the environmental effect that some of the current energy sources can bring. And this is a problem because, we are not living just for here and now. We are trying to build things so that, our future generation have a habitable place where they can live, where they can utilize some of the growth and the advancement that we're making. Otherwise, all the growth and the advancement that we're making, if it leads to destruction, it's counterproductive. So I also wanted to cover the other areas of course, the energy problem that we face is optimization, right? So today we have a lot of devices, machines, pretty much our entire world is dependent on energy. Now, when we have this entire world dependent on energy, the key issue is that there is a lot of wastage of that energy, whether it's at home setting, how we utilize our energy, whether it's an industrial setting, or whether it is in any external public setting. So energy management is key for us because it helps us plan, it helps us utilize this finite resources that we have effectively. Distribution is another component. As we speak, all of us are dependent on general grid electricity that has been established or that's been invented, about 100, 200 years ago, and we are utilizing almost the same model to distribute the energy across grids for us to power our homes, our day-to-day active resources. Separately, we have now more in terms of mobility, we have transportation vehicles that depends on these grid systems. So the distribution has some certain major problem that we face is because there is loss. This is not that it's coming in its purest form. So if you're talking about 100 kilowatt of energy that's being produced at the source, we're not necessarily getting 100 kilowatt at the end of the source. So there are losses that are happening. Alternatively, we have other alternative resources such as chemical energy resources such as the battery, as well as solar power. The efficiency factor in terms of distribution is quite challenging, and which is something that that is a problem as we face as our number of devices, our requirement for power increases. So all that put together, our global energy security is at threat, right? So today, the entire capitalistic economy is based on the assumption that we're gonna have positive, GDP, for the foreseeable future. And the major factor that rests on that is energy, right? So we assume that energy is going to be there constantly to grow and power our economy, which is a fallacy, because that is not the case. And when we think about that, then are we really planning, in terms of what we are going to face? Are we really planning the problems that we are going to face immediately in the next few years as we come? So in order to tackle that, some of the great countries across the world have taken major initiatives. Globally, we have taken initiatives to distribute our energy dependency to cleaner and alternative energy resources. However, there are challenges there too. Even though certain cleaner energies sometimes could seem quite effective, they're either only designed for large settings, or not designed to last too long, or have issues around efficiency, again, what I mentioned earlier. On the other hand, the adoption of machines and electronics is growing, and which means that the demand is growing. Today, we are looking at a situation, even Moore's law would not apply, because the rate of adoption of new devices is almost vertical today. That being said, so what can we do, right? So if we take the fossil fuel for starters, which pretty much takes about more than 80% of the total energy utilization that we're doing today, this fossil fuels is giving us more problems than solutions that it is able to provide. The major thing, that advantage that a fossil fuel has, is that it is able to provide really high energy, which is what we require for our existing devices, whether it is to power a car, whether it is to power a home, whether it is to power larger transportation mobility services, or industrial settings or industries where large-scale productions are necessities today. Now, when it comes to the disadvantage, as I said earlier, so I'm not going to go deeper into that. But what I'm going to talk about is more on the other aspect that we already know is happening. So pollution is another factor. So we have already seen these fossil fuels, countries like in the Far East, such as China, which is heavily dependent on coal, has a major pollution problem. Its air is not clean. People are facing health-related issues in other parts of the world where oil spillages are happening and causing death of marine lives across. So obviously, the fossil fuels are causing immense amount of problem. On the other hand, acidification through being used across some of the byproducts of these fossil fuels, right? So carbon dioxide emission has been a major problem. And according to the Paris climate change, the countries have signed to reduce, as we know, about 2% by 2100 to tackle this problem. But is that enough? That's my question. And that's something that I constantly think about, is that, we are in 21st century, we're in the year 2020, yet we're dependent on an invention or dependent on something that we came up about almost 150 years ago. So are we really thinking about this problem in a nutshell? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, this is, I no doubt, this is not cosmetic. This is not, for us to look good. This is a necessity. We need to know how we can resolve this problem, because if we have not resolved this problem, all we are doing is that we are buying time and we are diverting away from the primary problem that we are facing. Because without this, we pretty much don't have a solution. So if we have innovations in AI, in robotics, in blockchain, which of course all of us are familiar with the mining processes, it's going to extinguish in the next 50 years. So what kind of planning we are doing, I think, our planning has a major flaw over here. So that being said, there are other processes that we are able to harness energy. So one of that is nuclear energy. So when we're talking about nuclear energy, and I know that this form of energy always get a bad rep, and this is due to an understanding problem. So whenever we hear nuclear energy, we associate nuclear energy with some of the the more disastrous impact nuclear energy or nuclear forces have done. But however, just to go, just on a very scientific level, everything is nuclear and atomic in nature. So we pretty much, whatever we are looking at has atoms and subatomic particles as well as a nucleus inside it. So what we're just talking about is the energy that can be harnessed from those particles that you're just every day you're surrounded by. Of course, the method of extraction of nuclear energy today, or as we know, are being used by some of those other materials, and in this case, radioactive elements like uranium, which is where some of the bad reps are coming from. However, if we look at it in terms of overall, in terms of overall efficiency as well as overall safety standards, nuclear energy have had the lowest amount of threats when accidents compared to any other energy processes, such as the coal, oil, and gas. However, as we know, nuclear energy is immensely powerful. So any such accidents may cause serious long-term impact to the global society, as we have seen through the nuclear fallout from the Chernobyl as well as in Fukushima. But at the same time, there are newer models, newer methods of having nuclear reactors, which are far safer and can be readily used, and energy can be produced. So there are two major processes of nuclear energy, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with them. So one is the nuclear fission, and the other one is the nuclear fusion. So when we're talking about nuclear fission, it's taking just in a high level, taking smaller pieces of particles and breaking them, and thus creating the energy. On the other hand, fusion is bringing particles together to create energy, and fusion has been the most trusted source of energy. I'm sure all of you are familiar with daylight, and when we're looking outside every day, we are receiving heat energy coming out from our star in our system, the sun. The sun has been active for almost 1 billion years or more, and the key method as to how it harnesses energy is through nuclear fusion. So really, when we're talking about testament of something that has been proven and something that is reliable and successful, that is the sun, right? I mean, we're looking at it, we're using it, we're harnessing it, we're building everything on it. So It is a process that's definitely trustworthy and that functions for a very long time. And these are the directions that we need to be thinking in order for us to come up with solutions as we are talking about our planet, and not solution that could just give us another 5 years of lifeline or 10 years of lifeline, but probably a millennia of lifeline. Now, that being said, of course, apart from that, as globally we are becoming also aware about the problems that we are facing, we also know that we need to act, right? So a lot of us have already taken many initiatives, whether it is impact investments, whether it is creating dialogue, whether it's creating agreements such as the Paris Agreement, etc., to tackle the problems in terms of energy sustainability, energy security, as well as planet Earth's sustainability. But the key factor that lies over here, which is something that I like to say, is that all these initiatives have one thing in common, and the one thing in common over here is that it tackles everything except the real solution, right? So today, whatever planning that we have is more related to habits. Maybe we travel less, we pay more for carbon emissions, or we move to hybrid energy dependency, where a house can be powered by electricity and solar power. But all of these are lifestyle cosmetic changes. It still does not solve the major problem. And the major problem is that we do not have a scientific or a technical solution to this problem. And really, the only way for us to come out of this situation is through improvement in technology. There is no other alternative way that we can resolve this. Everything else is going to be added value into the process, but it is not the core solution that we're looking for. So when we talk about improvements, we have two different pathways, right? So whether it is through creating or depending on new alternative energy sources, or there is another method that we are talking about, which is something along the line of circular economy, which is waste management, right? So when we're talking about waste management, we're talking about our existing resources being reutilized for energy purposes. So I'll go more in details to it, but at the same time, I want to say that investments have been poured in today to a lot of these alternative solutions, and a lot of the investors have this big tagline of impact investments as well as sustainable investment. My real question is that how truly these investments are actually making a difference is something that we need to understand, because at the end of the day, the investments are definitely in good faith. But the question is it in good understanding of the science and the problems that we're facing? I'm not so sure. So I'll go to the next page. So when we're talking about alternative energy sources, so we are talking about how we can replace the existing fossil fuels, right? So as we have mentioned earlier about our different methods. So when I will discuss fossil fuels, I will discuss or pretty much subject it to oil, gas, and coal. So when we are in the alternative energy sector, so the first thing that I wanted to bring up, and something that I already mentioned earlier, is nuclear energy. So let's talk about the fission process, energy harnessing of energy harnessing through the fission process, right? So fission process is the older process, is the process that we are more familiar with, the process that we have used to do a lot of positive things and a lot of certain negative things, right? So now let's talk about the positive things and how these were generating electricity. I mean, there are countries which are heavily dependent on this process. Countries like France, depend heavily through the generation of electricity through nuclear energy. Now, the small modular reactor is a very good iteration or example of modernized nuclear fission processes, right? So the SMR today is being used in various military applications, right? One of that includes nuclear powered naval vessels. So whether it's the nuclear submarines, or whether it's the nuclear powered aircraft carriers, right? We've been using it, and when we are talking about scale, this is a scale that is also movable, right? So this was not doable before, right? When we are talking about in the earlier days, we had nuclear reactors that were fixed in land locations and basically generated electricity or energy from that. Today, we can actually create smaller and smaller modular reactor that can be utilized in some of these vessels. And also some of the key advantages of this is that it reduces the cost, the large capital costs that are associated with like installing, large fixed nuclear reactors in the land. And also it reduces the chance of large scale nuclear meltdown. And it's a proven science technology. Most of our defenses or the military across in different parts of the world depends on this. So, and on board these vessels, we have, dedicated servicemen who are constantly well trained and also constantly understanding how this kind of systems can be used and managed. So this is not something that we would, take lightly, because this improvements can take us for a very long distance, because tomorrow we can talk about in the mobility side, how we can utilize this energy towards sustainable future. Now, of course, this is a debate that we are having internationally all over, right? There we have people who would think that nuclear power energy is very dangerous for us. On the other hand, the alternative is also very dangerous. I don't know why we fail to understand this, but as I mentioned earlier, that we are running out of, we won't have energy security. So if you are looking at a future that's dark, black, and you are not depending on any of the things that you're using today, then I have no other any point to object to. But if you want to maintain the status quo that we are in, then the alternative is also so dangerous that it can pretty much disrupt everything that we know or know how we are going to function. And that is simply not going to change just by cosmetic or lifestyle changes. So the other process that the nuclear energy process can utilize is the nuclear fusion process, which is what I just mentioned. This is a newer method, of course, and it is the method, as I mentioned earlier, that helps the sun generate its fuel or continuously emit energy. And this process is a much reliable, but of course expensive, but at the same time, cleaner process of nuclear energy. And so in this sector, we have seen some major improvement. A lot of investors as well as a lot of entities have taken deep interest in this area, as we are trying to also do this process in a lower scale model. In other words, the same way we have the small modular reactors, we would like to have smaller nuclear fusion reactors, which enables us to get the results. However, we're still a few years down the line to have that particular process in place, but I think this is getting accelerated as fast because there are thinkers similar to my viewpoints. There are engineers who are working around the clock, as well as scientists, to make this thing a reality. Now, that being said, the other alternative process, and that's something is very cutting edge and something that we are familiar with, and this is something that the NASA uses, which is the RTG, or the radioisotope thermoelectric generator, right? So this is a very interesting process, right? So this itself is a process of harnessing this energy, creating electric power through the utilization of heat on certain radioisotopes, right? So in this case, the plutonium-238 is natural decay is being utilized through heat to get the effect. Now, this is particularly effective for spacecrafts that we are using, and we are trying to send them far away, right? So we want to continue our advancement, our research in outside our Earth, so that, and where, you know, the distance as well as the timelines are very different that we have over here. There we need something that's dependable for a very long time, that is also at the same time able to go through some of the challenges that we face in physics, right? So when it comes to, when we're talking about rockets, for example, we've been dependent on that chemical energy process for almost 50 years and over, right? So that is a very rudimentary process. Of course, you know, it's been successful, but at the same time, you know, there are issues. So if we talk about a rocket, the chemical energy powered rocket takes about almost 80% of the total space inside a rocket. So in other words, a rocket's 80% of its available space is actually a fuel tank, right? So I'm sure all of us are familiar with that. The question is, that is not a very efficient process, right? And we have to come up and think about alternatives. But at the same time, you know, when that process goes, you know, when our rockets leave our Earth's gravitational field, when it reaches the outer space, we need other things or other devices that can do certain recon. So whether it's sending a rover in Mars, or whether it's having a rover in the moon, or sending a spacecraft, you know, out there in the you know, wild outer space, as I would say, to be powered and continuously give us information as well as data that will advance our learning and thinking and our science, we need, you know, an alternative process. And in this case, the RTG acts as a very interesting innovation. That being said, you know, of course, we have another cleaner and more, you know, I would say politically correct energy resource, right? Which is the hydropower. So hydropower typically, you know, allows us to harness the flow of water that are abundant across our world to be converted to electrical energy. The major challenge, of course, in this one is that we have this hydropower, and of course, you know, this is clean, we can utilize it. Of course, we are familiar with one of the first and of course largest dam in the world, the Niagara Falls, which enables some large portion of the electricity generation in the US or North America. And but at the same time, you know, the scale has to be immensely large, or it has to be immense in order for us to get an effective result from this. It's not like that we can use the flow of the current to power a vehicle today. Maybe in a certain research capacity we can, but in a commercial scale, those are challenging. But at the same time, you know, this is a solution that that we have, and that will help us to counter some of these challenges that we are having globally. It's clean, and it can produce enough electricity, and also we have abundant supply of that, so we can reuse that, so it's recyclable or it's circular, and we can consistently generate electricity. So this, I would always say, hydropower is always a dependable source, regardless of scale. We can always look into the innovation factor while we are thinking about powering the future. Now, the other ones that we are consistently coming with, and as we mentioned, although the sun generates its energy or fuel through the nuclear fusion process, the way it delivers energy is what we call today here on Earth the solar energy. So the large amount of energy that is being produced from the sun, we're able to harness that. Now, a significant amounts of work as well as adoption has been happening around solar energy across the world. Companies formed, investments went in, and different devices try to adopt the utilization of solar cells to harness the power of solar energy. Now, solar energy itself is a consistent source, as in places where there's strong sunlight, where the solar energy is large enough to power certain things. The problem again, and as we all know, is that solar energy is very powerful. However, it's traveling over almost few million miles of distances. By the time it's finally coming to us, almost 80% of its energy is lost. And then when it enters the Earth's atmosphere and to the point where we get where it reaches the solar cells, it loses another large portion of its energy. And then when we have it in the solar cell, the efficiency rate has been really low, because at the end of the day, once the solar energy comes in and is received in the solar cell, we have the challenge still of conversion of that energy. And during that conversion process also, we lose a large portion of that energy, and thus the efficiency of this energy is nominal. And of course, we have made a lot of improvements. In fact, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, about 15 years ago, there were a major innovation where certain car makers were putting solar panels in cars, where we could see solar vehicles, and a lot of companies tried to do that, as well as solar aircrafts. And the problem is, ultimately it never really took off, because again, like I say, that we are in 2020, and we cannot expect the rest of the population and all of us to go back to how we used to live in the 1700s, right? So this is not going to happen anytime soon, unless we go through a cataclysmic event, which is something that we want to avoid, something more similar to the Ice Age. So the point, what I'm trying to say is that, again, that if we are to go to that future, solar energy, even though it's dependable, the efficiency, yes, we can work on that, but it's scientifically limited. So you have to understand that you can only, and I love to use this term, it's a layman term, but I would use this term, that you can only squeeze the lemon as much as the juice is available inside the lemon. You can't squeeze it more than you can to get an output, right? So in this case, the solar energy is scientifically limited. And I mean, based on all the calculation, there is no way you can actually achieve certain things through the solar energy that we think is a requirement, not would be, is a requirement today and in the future. So the point is that, of course, solar energy, we can utilize this as an alternative added energy source along with another energy source, but it cannot be our primary source or solution to powering today or the future. So the waste problem is another factor that we are facing, and as I said, so we're going to try to think about this energy problem in two different ways. So as we have spoken about some of the alternative energy processes, waste problem or waste management system has become interesting in different places, where not only waste, reutilizing some of the existing resources for energy generation is a new innovation that we can think about. One factor that I already mentioned earlier, apart from energy, large amount of energy being created from nuclear energy, there is a major problem of nuclear waste. Today, when we are talking about certain countries, so let's assume France in this case, deals with a large number of nuclear waste problems. So, and this nuclear waste, of course, as we may know, has major certain issues that can impact as well as be quite alarming to the community. So it has to be handled very carefully as well as in the most efficient manner. So when it comes to that, this nuclear waste, there are different methods of handling nuclear waste, but it is a problem. It's piling up. As we are piling up, again, we go back to the same situation. It's a sustainability problem, not only for nuclear waste, but any other waste. It is a sustainability problem because if we do not know how to handle or reuse this waste, we're going to have a world full of waste that we cannot use. So we need to think about ways how we can handle this, right? So as I mentioned earlier, the problems around nuclear waste, of course, is massive, right? So it stays there for hundreds of thousands of years, right? They're then dangerous, radioactive byproducts, and they're radioactive. They threaten, other ecological habitats, right? So even if you store the nuclear waste deep underground, you still are at risk to kind of contaminate, not today, not in the next few years, but under certain circumstances, because nuclear storages which are done deep underground are in a lot of time are done in geological repositories, so which is essentially some underground caverns and caves also, which are being repurposed, reutilized for nuclear storages. However, as we all know that the Earth is not static. The Earth is dynamic. The Earth is having constant tectonic shift that is moving the Earth every now and then. And any situations like that could compromise the highly secured nuclear storage or waste storage facilities. And of course, the regulation process of dealing this nuclear waste is massive, right? So, and over the course of time, we see also another economic challenge. Certain countries which are able to acquire nuclear energy, which is least to say is not a inexpensive process to acquire. It's an expensive process to acquire, which means certain countries which have more GDP, more capacity would be able to harness the power of nuclear energy, which goes back to the problem that they might be utilizing smaller countries to deal with the nuclear waste problems, and thus creating a challenge for the security or management of this nuclear waste across the world. The other problem that we face is bio-waste, right? So we have already spoken about some of the environmental effect from fossil fuels through on the biological lives, right? Whether it's a marine biological life or anything else in a nutshell. But bio-waste is another problem, right? So we are having problems that includes, every day today we are using plastic and other materials. These materials are growing all over, even rubber, which is primarily used in the car tires and other facilities. These are problems that we are going to come across, and we are coming across, as we have seen across several countries, and then more especially in places like in Southeast Asia, where countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia are heavily exposed to ocean pollution due to this bio-waste. So the other bio-waste problem, and it's also a way that some of these alternative energies are being generated, and one of that includes natural gas or methane. They're using bio-waste to produce this methane, and this waste are kind of like filling up the landfills across the world. Now, what kind of solutions can we think around this waste, right? So that is the key factor that we need to think about. Can we think about a solution that we can apply, that we can use, that will enable us to kind of build energy solutions, as well as resolve the energy problem that we face globally today? I think we can. So we have seen some very interesting innovation in the coming days, right? So let's talk about energy in two main terms, right? So energy in the form of chemical energy or energy in the form of electrical energy, right? So chemical energy is being converted in certain places to bring the electrical energy, right? So lithium, which we are familiar with, which is something that we use as a battery, is a very good resource for us when it comes to alternative energy. But a lot of people also tend to forget that, battery is also a chemical energy, right? So battery has certain chemicals involved in it, such as in this case, the element of lithium is involved to produce lithium-ion batteries. Separately, while producing lithium-ion batteries, we're talking about factors such as conflict minerals like cobalt, which is coming from certain countries across the world, which are currently in a conflict situation where people are being exploited to extract this particular key ingredient that's being used in the lithium batteries. Now, this is also a finite source. So which means that even though we tend to think that, oh, battery powered vehicle or battery powered machines are the future to our thinking, it has one fundamental problem right there, that the solution that we are thinking is the solution is still, again, a finite solution. This is a solution that's going to run out after a certain time. And so how do we tackle this? So there is a company that I came across, and it's very interesting. It's called Cuberg. What Cuberg is doing is essentially they're redesigning the lithium metal batteries and creating a new battery from existing batteries, right? So they're utilizing the existing batteries that has been created, that's been used, and then and repurposing it for utilization. Similarly, we have major lithium waste problems, as I mentioned earlier. So lithium it has issues such as it's how to deal with the waste of lithium. Certain companies have taken major initiative in terms of energy storage, right? So storage is a very important aspect of when we are talking about battery powered energy reserves. So we have a company called Nostromo, which is also taking an interesting approach to resolve the problem, as well as creating a new alternative solution. Now let's talk about the other waste problem that I mentioned earlier, which is the nuclear waste. Of course, there are different ways to manage nuclear waste, whether it's storage pools, which allows us to both maintain as well as moderate nuclear fuels through water bases, which kind of absorbs radiation, as well as deal with the heat released by the nuclear fuel, the nuclear elements. The water is actually resistant to radiation, so which helps. So, but there are different ways that we are able to slowly start understanding how nuclear management can be done. So as I mentioned earlier, there are repositories that we are utilizing to kind of like control the management of the waste. And I think we have to think about how we can handle this nuclear waste, because this is a serious issue that we're going to face in the coming days. So that being said, yes.
Efron, sorry, just want to jump in. I mean, this is so fascinating, but I wanted to jump in. We're about at time, so we've got about a minute or two left. So I don't mean to rush you, but we are at that hour. We've got to kind of wrap things up. So I don't know if you've got maybe one or two slides you want to show before we have to close out here in about 2 minutes.
Fantastic. Right. Thanks, Kyle. So I think the last portion of this that I wanted to tackle is a nuclear waste solution that I come across. And this is something that I'm deeply involved in. And I think something that could be an interesting process to think about. It's creating a battery that has more power than a fossil fuel, almost 7 times more power than a lithium battery, and something that we can repurpose and reutilize through the management of nuclear waste that we are creating today through the fission process. And I think some of the research that's been done till date is in relation to cutting edge research in the fields of diamonds, nuclear, and nanotechnology. So there are ways, alternative ways that we are repurposing and we can think about. So I'll pause right there. I'll be happy to take any questions from you, Kyle, because all this time I've been on a monologue and would love to hear just any short inputs that you may have. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a ton, and there's been some great questions incoming, but again, we're out of time. So I guess I just have, one quick question, and that is, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, maybe one of each is just very quick. Where is the biggest opportunity? Where should I be starting as an entrepreneur? And then where should I be looking to place bets as an investor? So maybe just a quick response on each of those.
That's a great question. Thanks, Kyle. I think as an entrepreneur, I think it is to look at the biggest problem, right? Which is the energy itself and how we can scientifically advance the existing solution or the solutions that we need. So think outside the box. That's going to be the first place. So I think, as I've shown, like nuclear energy is a way that one could think about in taking the bad rep out. There are innovations that we can do over there, and there's not scientific limitations there. On the investor side, I think it's very important for investors to take deeper note into understanding of how energy is created and how energy will be distributed in the future. Because without that clear understanding and the depth of that science that is required to tackle this such a big problem, we cannot be moving forward with investments. As I said earlier, ductive solution is not going to be the solution for us, and that's long lasting. So we want to make a long-term impact, and for that, we need to understand the landscape better as an investor. So I would say look into other solutions that are out there, apart from the ones that have already been proven to not being scientifically effective. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. And re-listen to this episode, and definitely reach out to Efron online as well. I mean, he's got a wealth of knowledge. This episode was packed, and I can't wait to uncover this further. I know we're going to have a panel coming up in the next week or so around this with some additional experts in your network. So I'm excited to go deeper. But Efron, as we close out, where can everyone find you online?
Thank you, Kyle. And again, thank you everyone for listening to my monologue, and also, would love to hear your questions. You can reach out to me directly through LinkedIn, and looking forward to the next session. Thank you, LaToken, and thank you, Kyle.
Wonderful. And again, thank you, Efron, and thank you to our audience. If you like what you heard today, make sure to give us a thumbs up, click subscribe, make sure to reach out to Efron, myself, Elena, or to the entire LaToken team. We'd love to hear from you, hear feedback, and also hear if you would like to join future episodes as they come. And without further ado, we'll see you back here tomorrow as we start to unpack on another episode of VCTV, machine learning and data. Where are the investments being made? Where are they not being made? Where are the areas of opportunity? Following the conversation from Efron, from our previous panel about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and from those founders that we heard from earlier as well. Without further ado, again, thank you, Elena, to the entire LaToken team. I'm Kyle Lacotte.